Resident Evil Requiem. We are finally here, the next gen Resident Evil game that we've been waiting for. And honestly, I do feel that this truly is a next gen experience. They finally stepped it up. Whereas Village and 7, they were kind of testing the waters, seeing what kind of genre that they wanted to play into. With Resident Evil Requiem, we are now getting 2 games, basically. 2! Yes, that's right. It's basically 2 games in one, because you get the survival horror aspect, and then you also get the over-the-top, crazy action, thanks to Leon being an absolute beast. And we all know that Leon can handle himself, and the gameplay we find in Resident Evil Requiem is very much similar to Resident Evil 4, but instead of getting a little bit more slow with age, it seems Leon has been huffing too many herbs.
Believe it. It can't be. It has long bottom leaf. The finest biteweed in the South Farthing.
Because that's the only way I can explain that instead of with age getting more slower, getting a little bit more, kind of steady on his feet, slower with his aim, now Leon is just a full-on death machine. We have come a very long way from Resident Evil 2 and how Leon has transformed. I just have to say that obviously, those herbs are working, okay? They're working their magic. So today I'm going to be giving you my Resident Evil Requiem review. This is the Resident Evil Requiem early review based on everything that I've managed to see, hands-on gameplay. Do consider checking out my Tokyo Game Show vlog if you're interested in, interviews with developers and trying out different games. I'm going to get into all the positives and negatives for this Resident Evil Requiem review, but first a quick word from today's sponsor, and then we're going to get straight into this, so stick around and yeah. So if you're excited to customize Resident Evil Requiem with mods and trainers, just simply type it in on the Xmod homepage on the app. You can download the launcher and go over to get notified when the game releases, and all the mods and trainers will be available after launch, so keep up to date. Now if you're a true gamer like me and you love customizing your games, modding them, adding different trainers, and just playing around with different mechanics and just doing whatever you want in games, that's how it should be, then check out Xmod, because they have all the Resident Evil games available for you to play around with. So let's check out 4. Now this one I highly recommend you play before the next game comes out, as the combat is very similar with Leon, but you can add trainers like easy crafting, you can add unlimited health, or you can edit different presets together. For example, if you're tired of trying to get down the parry, you can just add an auto parry, or you can even customize the look of some characters, like Ashley's hair. So let's take a look at God mode, ignore hits. Xmod is a platform that unlocks thousands of free cheats, mods, and trainers for your favorite single-player PC games. Now, the main features of Xmod is it supports over 5,000 PC games, from massive AAA games to smaller indie titles. With regular updates, it stays compatible with brand new games releasing day 1. So, what are you waiting for? Get modding today by using Xmod. Link below in the description. Make sure you go check it out and enjoy the games at their full potential with Xmod. So I'm going to get into all the positives and negatives for this Resident Evil Requiem review, and bear in mind that this is from the early access and the hands-on stuff at press event. Luckily, I am close by to Tokyo, so I get to go to the Tokyo Game Show every single year to play a bunch of new games, and I pushed myself last year and got to play a bunch of this and from everything else that I got to see. So let's dive deep into this, look at it from an early review perspective, as it is important to check out these games before they are released, just in case they do a 180 or things aren't exactly as they seem.
Don't ask questions you aren't prepared to handle the answer to.
A lot of today's gaming hype is marketing, and it's important to cut through the BS and look at things properly. That's why I'm going to give you positives and negatives. I don't give you a review score at the end. I'm sure you're intelligent enough to decide whether this game is for you or not, and I will tell you if I have a subjective bias or if it's purely objective. So I hope that helps. Now let's get into this. I do think, as I said in my previous video, that this game is basically like a big celebration moment for the series as a whole, a big anniversary celebration, because this game, like I said, takes elements from all the previous games, and where Resident Evil Village in some ways felt a little bit messy, a little bit kind of just thrown together in some aspects, this is trying to cater to both audiences. People who are die-hard fans of Resident Evil 4, but I do love the original more just with the aiming mechanic and stuff like that. But it was safe to say that the remake was very successful, so it caters to that audience with having these Leon sections, the combat being literally like 100 times more balls to the walls. Like I said, he's on some serious herbage, and the kill cams, the cinematic like finishers and stuff like that you get now is pretty insane. The fact that you can wield more insane weapons that enemies used to use on you, now you're using it on them. Stuff like that really adds to the kind of power fantasy element of it all. But there is a problem with this design philosophy, because it is almost a duality that they're trying to go for. The horror side of things with Grace, you know, that survival horror, that much more slower approach to gameplay, puzzle solving, a limited number of, equipment slots, stuff like that, and crafting elements leads to Grace's gameplay feeling much more survival horror, that of Resident Evil 7, and the older Resident Evil games, and then Leon being much more of that action focus. And the way they've balanced this is very interesting, and that is the first positive I really want to highlight, is the fact that basically this world is connected, okay? So when you do come across the same areas, you need to think about this tactically. You know, who's going to use the resources more? Is it going to be Leon or is it going to be Grace? Because they actually share the same game world, the same amount of enemies as well, so perhaps you want to be more sneaky, and then you can come into that area later as Leon clear it out much more thoroughly, or you might want to leave some resources for Leon to find, because it is actually a shared game world. It's not like it resets the level, and I really do love that design, because it really makes it feel much more like you're playing it from different perspectives instead of it just resetting as like a game world. It makes it feel much more immersive. Now, I do hope you enjoyed this Resident Evil Requiem review, looking at this game from the early access stuff and all the hands-on gameplay, and from what I've actually managed to get my hands on myself as well at events. But I do ask that you do subscribe to the channel. It really does help out a lot, especially giving the video a like, as that's really important. But honestly, more than anything, I'm just happy that you're watching, and for returning viewers, it really does mean a lot to me. Please consider checking out my music on Spotify. I make experimental electronic music, a new album is coming, or by just joining as a member to support me, dropping a thanks. If you like deeper analysis on gaming, looking at video games through a philosophical lens, philosophical videos, video essays, and early reviews like this that just cover a new game coming out, do subscribe to this channel. Leon has access to many different weapons now, and he's equipped with hatchets, and he can use other melee weapons throughout the game. Like I said, now when you get an enemy weak enough, you can actually do these crazy takedowns. So you just feel even more overpowered as Leon compared to even Resident Evil 4, because it doesn't take that much to open up an enemy for a takedown. It's not just, you know, like doing a roundhouse kick anymore. And then on the other side, Grace is very underpowered, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, but I just want to stress how Leon is even more dangerous. And the enemies themselves are much more reactive, like the animations, their facial animations, all this kind of stuff. The amount of different zombie types, which I'll talk about more later as well. Like, there's just so much more detail here. So the action set pieces really feel very gory and visceral, and this is definitely the most bloodiest Resident Evil game in a long time. Now, a quick side note, I do think Capcom, for the last 5 years, I mentioned this briefly in my last video, I just don't think they've missed for a very long time. They're very good at, you know, adding to their games, experimenting. For a AAA, you know, company, that's quite rare in gaming, and I just want to commend them for always trying something new, and especially in the last like 5 years, just all of their games have been great, and they've just allowed for different teams to experiment and express ideas, and that's what I really think the gaming industry needs, especially when we're flooded with so much AI slop and just, you know, this lack of experimentation. I'm just glad that we still see big studios take risk, and I feel like the Resident Evil games are very, you know, core to that design philosophy. Each game tries to add something different. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but it is a big thing for me because I'm just very autistic about these attention to details, and I just love the RE engine. Like, it's the best goddamn engine in a very long time. Compared to Unreal Engine, it's night and day. Just amazing, you know, how much optimization is here, how good the lighting looks. You know, the only thing you could say about this is the texture detail isn't always as great, the zombies being much more expressive this time around, the reload animations, everything is just far crisper this time around, and it just makes you feel even more immersed. And the physics have definitely been bumped up, like the way they all kind of shuffle into each other, you know, push each other around. Also, as Grace, you can use this push mechanic, and it won't, you know, just stumble one zombie, you can use it to actually stumble many of them. And it's just quite creepy, like some of the expressions that these zombies have compared to previous games where they all kind of felt like copy and pasted. This time around, they've definitely focused more on that physics system, you know, capping them in the knee. That's always been a thing, even back to Resident Evil 4, like shooting, you know, the weapons out of their hands. But it's got that same creative expression that Resident Evil 4 had, but with even more realistic ragdolls and stuff like that. And to me, that matters a lot. That's what makes the combat so engaging in these games. And the zombies this time around, there's many more versions of them. Before, like, it was the same type. You know, sometimes you would get like a centipede that would just spawn out of someone's head, or you would get like, you know, chainsaw men running after you. But now the base zombies themselves are, you know, they all have different types. So you can have like screamers, you can have ones that are sensitive to sound, you can have blind ones that almost act like clickers from The Last of Us, or you can even have ones that are light sensitive. So, you know, lighting actually matters now in this game. Carrying a torch actually matters. You know, shooting different light sources or turning off light sources, this actually affects some zombie types. You know, some of them reflect their previous personalities, like a cook or a singer. You've probably seen that with other people talking about that, but I just like the attention to detail here. It's just a lot better and much more zombie types. So the next positive is the grace aspect of this whole formula, but I do feel that some of this kind of dualist design philosophy with, you know, action and horror, it sounds good on paper, but sometimes it kind of makes it all feel a little bit empty, or a little bit like it doesn't have as much stakes, because in the end you'll know that, you know, the ones that are stalking you, the stalker type enemies, you know, kind of like Nemesis and all that kind of stuff, those types of enemies, for Leon, they're bosses, okay? They're, you know, mini bosses that you take down. Think about, you know, like the boat sequence in Resident Evil 4, or like the giants that you have to take out. It's the same here, but as Grace, you can't actually do anything. They become more horror set pieces, you know, thinking of like the baby, the aborted little treasure that we got in the previous Resident Evil game. It's kind of more like that for Grace, but because you know that you can actually kill them, they become less scary, even if you are playing as different characters. So I don't know, it just loses some of that horror aspect, I think, having Leon in here. It's nice that they have, you know, this kind of shared level design as well, like I said, and interactable elements are shared across two characters. I just think it loses some tension knowing that you're gonna come through later and basically blast all of these zombies and scary creatures away. It loses some of that horror aspect. They needed to find a way to keep it more separate if they wanted that horror atmosphere, because you can't really have your cake and eat it too. You know, you can't really be a full committed horror game, but then, you know, later just blast them all with a shotgun. It just doesn't quite work that way. But I do like the idea that they're playing around with, you know, that it's going to be like one setting and then now it's an action game, character action game, where he's literally like DMC over here doing all kinds of crazy moves. The crafting system with Grace as well, you know, it sounds good on paper, and these kind of powerful finishes that you can pull off, like these sneak attacks to blow up zombies, you know, if you collect enough of their blood and stuff like that, but you have to keep a lookout. But then you have to also take it back to analyze it, and it's all a little bit, you know, just over the top, and I just think a little bit clumsy in how they execute the crafting stuff. I just don't really like crafting in this sense. You know, like on the go, that's fine, picking up different resources, but there's a lot just to unlock these, you know, like one-off moves. But it does matter later on because there are blister heads in this, which are basically much more powerful types of zombies that can come back later. Now, when we look back at the Resident Evil games, you know, some of their puzzle design in the older games were much more thought-provoking, and it wasn't just simply find an item, bring it back to unlock something else. Obviously it was that as well, but the recent Resident Evil games have very much fallen into that. You know, you go to a location, you find an item, you backtrack, and then you unlock the next thing, you know, or the next area. And I feel like they could have done a bit more with the puzzles. There's also some hand-holdy mechanics like yellow paint, yellow shit everywhere, which is not necessary for a game like this, especially when they trust you enough to, you know, pull off these crazy combat moves. It just takes away some of the immersion, and it makes you feel, you know, like a baby that they have to smear yellow paint on certain places, and of course this never used to be a thing. I think these games are strongest when it is condensed in one area. When I think about Village, you know, I wish the whole game was just kind of set in the castle, to be honest. Like, it's such a good location. It's a very sexually confusing but also intriguing boss and enemy that you have on your hands that you don't get to enjoy long enough, if you know what I mean. Being chased around by dummy mummy. It could have been a little bit longer. That could have been the whole game. It might have been better for it.
Wait long.
But it does slightly remind me of a Dark Souls 1, you know, kind of interconnected world. I really love that level design, and then finding these items, unlocking new areas, it feels much more rewarding when the puzzles are all interconnected in a tighter space. So I really hope that this game stays, you know, mostly in the hospital and other like smaller areas, because having that shared level design from what I've seen is really cool, but we don't know what comes later in the game. There is definitely a non-linear approach to this, especially in the parts that I have seen and the gameplay that other press have spoken about as well. You can actually take on these different objectives in your own time and in your own way, which will actually trigger, you know, certain stalker enemies and stuff like that. So I like the fact that it's not going to be the same every time. And like I said, now with the zombies, you know, having more, you know, like interactable elements to them, showing their personalities more, it is kind of like, you know, them being more hollow, you know, seeing a bit of their personality shine through previously to what they actually were before. I really like that essence, and it makes it feel much more haunting and sad taking out these enemies, and at times it comes back to that goofy sense of humor that the kind of, you know, what the fuck era of Resident Evil games like 5 and 6.
Come on! Come on! Come on! Come on! Come on! Come on!
Now, it's clear that this game is kind of built in mind for Grace to be more in first person and Leon to be more in third person, as that kind of is easier for pulling off these kind of crazy combos and just different combat moves that you have as Leon. But I do like the fact that you can actually play this however you want. There's, you know, nice accessibility here. Like I said, you can be third person or first person, which I really like with this game. Like I said, you know, it really does feel like a kind of, you know, collection of what Resident Evil has been over the years, all into one game. So it's definitely true that the yin and yang kind of gameplay of this can work, and it definitely does, because it does give you that kind of power rush and that you know, power fantasy when you are playing as Leon. But this does mean that it lessens some of the impact for the horror elements. That's what I would say. But overall, I do think that, you know, Leon being kind of over the top in this does make sense, because this is, you know, kind of a celebration of Leon, if you will. But some people might find that it is a little bit over the top when it comes to the combat, and then the horror elements. I wouldn't say it goes full Resident Evil 7. You still have a gun as Grace, you can still do combat, but it's much more slower, it's much more deliberate, and it's much more tense. The story as well seems to be taking itself kind of seriously, much more compared to like some of the previous Resident Evil games, which I do like, because of course these games are kind of ridiculous in some ways, but that's what makes them so fun. But the two characters here, you know, do play off of each other nicely, and she is a nice reflection of him when he kind of first started out, and a nice reflection of Resident Evil 2. I just hope it stays in these kind of more fixed environments, and, you know, this interconnected nature to them. And I just love that there's so much more variation. Like I said, you know, having some zombies showing their personality more, being more interactive with the environment, you interacting more with the environment is a big step up. Having, you know, some zombies kind of act like clickers, like I said, you know, it's just a nice variation that they aren't all the same. So yes, I do think Resident Evil Requiem is going to be a slam dunk. It is, you know, definitely much more focused this time around compared to some of the previous Resident Evil games, and it does play around with new ideas, but it does definitely lose some of that horror aspect, and some of it might feel a little bit played out in certain areas. But overall, I would definitely say that this is a fun and good Resident Evil game from all the early access stuff, and if they can stick with that and it doesn't go off the deep end like some Resident Evil games, then definitely this is going to be one of the GOATs of all of the Resident Evil games. So that is my Resident Evil Requiem review. There's only a few negatives, like I said, with some of the lessened impact of the horror, some of the crafting stuff, some of the puzzles just feeling very one note. I just hope that they stick with this level design as well, but everything else is crazy good from what I've actually seen and from the early access stuff at events. So I do hope you enjoyed this Resident Evil Requiem review based on all the early access stuff. I do think it's important to look at these games before they come out, just to make sure that they really are going to stick the landing, and I definitely think that if you're a fan of the previous Resident Evil games, you're definitely gonna love this. I just hope at some point in the future we get a Resident Evil game that delves deeper into its themes, not just the gameplay, because the stories that they tell are, you know, always, you know, just fun, almost kind of like a roller coaster ride. But it would be good to have one again that's similar to 2, that's a little bit more introspective and a bit more slow. That's personally what I love, but I think that this does do a balance of people who enjoy Resident Evil 4, that over-the-top combat that I also do love, and some of the horror aspects, but it doesn't quite bridge them together perfectly. And I hope we get to see Leon wrestle with, you know, his infection and stuff like that as well throughout the game. But I do definitely feel that this game does make you a little bit more sympathetic, and it makes like each of your kills of these zombies just feel a little bit more weighty, and that's a big step forward if you ask me. So I do hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, my wise ones, and any new wise ones or new subscribers. I do appreciate you, because I put everything into this channel, and it really does mean a lot to me to just express myself and try and be creative as well with this channel, with many different types of videos. So do go back and check out the other videos, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Have a great day. Peace out.